For nearly 2 decades, Evelyn Harper had been the heart of our quiet Willow Creek neighborhood. At 79, Mrs. Harper, as we all called her, was a soft-spoken widow who'd turned her modest corner lot into a dazzling garden that could stop you in your tracks. Roses, tulips, and lilies bloomed in perfect harmony, each bed a testament to her love for beauty and precision. A retired physics professor, she'd spent years teaching the laws of the universe. But her real magic was in those flowers and the white picket fence that framed them like a masterpiece. That fence, built 15 years ago after her husband, George, passed, was as much a part of Willow Creek as the oak trees lining our streets. George had dreamed of it, she once told me, saying her garden deserved a frame worthy of a gallery. For years, it stood unchallenged, a symbol of love and care until Cassandra Blake took over the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. Cassandra swept into our community 3 years ago, fresh from a high-flying career in corporate auditing. With her sharp blonde bob, designer yoga pants that screamed, "I mean business," and a smile that felt more like a challenge than a greeting, she was a force. She didn't just join the HOA. She conquered it, becoming president in a landslide. Within months, our once slim 15-page community rulebook ballooned to 40 pages of decrees, everything from approved mailbox colors to the exact angle of Christmas lights. Gone were the days of neighbors settling disputes over coffee. Now violations came with cold, official notices, strict deadlines, and fines that stung. Cassandra didn't just enforce rules. She hunted for infractions like a detective on a mission. Trouble brewed on a crisp spring morning when I glanced out my window and saw Cassandra marching along Mrs. Harper's fence, tape measure in hand, clipboard tucked under her arm. She moved with the focus of a health inspector at a greasy diner, measuring the fence at every post, scribbling notes with a frown. Later, I wandered over to Mrs. Harper, who was pruning her roses with the same care she'd once used to grade equations. Cassandra stopped by, she said, her voice calm but her eyes sharp. "Says my fence might be too tall. Over 4 feet, according to her tape." She measured 4 feet 4 inches in spots. I scoffed. That fence hadn't changed in 15 years. "Why now?" Mrs. Harper just smiled, a glint in her eye. "New leaders love to measure things. VYD. It's their way of Leah VYing a mark." 3 days later, a cream-colored notice with the HOA's logo appeared on Mrs. Harper's door, stamped with Notice of Non-Compliance in bold red. I was grabbing my mail when she found it, reading it on her porch with the focus of scientists studying data. 4 feet 4 inches, she murmured, loud enough for me to hear. At 7 points along the front. I stod med over, fuming. "This is ridiculous. That fence has been fine forever." She nodded, but her calm was unshaken. "Rules are rules, de VYD. But in physics, we know measurements aren't always what they seem." Her tone had an edge, like she was already plotting something. I should have remembered then that Evelyn Harper wasn't just a gardener. She'd spent decades in measurement science, even add VY Sing on national standards. Cassandra had picked a fight with the wrong retiree. The next morning, I spotted Mrs. Harper doing something unusual. Instead of tending her flowers, she was pacing her fence with a sleek laser measuring tool, the kind engineers drool over. She took readings with surgical precision, jotting notes in a small journal. Curiosity pulled me over. "Morning, Mrs. Harper. New toy." She glanced up, a spark in her smile. "Borrowed it from the university. Accurate to a 16th of an inch." I'm verifying Cassandra's numbers. Her readings told a different story. Every point along the fence measured between 3 feet, 11 inches, and 4 feet, exactly well under the limit. "Cassandra's numbers don't add up," she said, her voice steady but laced with intrigue. To be sure, she'd called in Dr. Leonard Carter, a structural engineering professor and old colleague, for a second opinion. That afternoon, Dr. Carter arrived, toting gear that looked like it belonged in a lab, not a suburb. He and Mrs. Harper spent hours measuring laser tools, tape measures, even a calibrated rod while I watched from my yard, hooked on the drama. They huddled over their data like detectives cracking a case, sketching diagrams and debating readings. When Dr. Carter left, He promised a formal report. Over tea the next day, Mrs. Harper laid it all out for me. Carter's measurements confirmed hers, averaging 3 feet 11.2 inches. But the real bombshell came from her security cameras. Grainy footage showed Cassandra measuring the fence. Her tape measure angled oddly, starting inches above the ground. Worse, a close-up revealed her tape was faulty, its markings stretched, inflating readings by nearly 10 fan tram. Her tool's defective, Mrs. Harper said, sipping her tea with a sly grin. And her technique's sloppy. I prepared a response for the HOA appeal. Tuesday's meeting should be enlightening. The HOA appeals meeting was usually a snooze 3 committee members, a nervous resident, and maybe a nosy neighbor. Not this time. The clubhouse was packed with 25 residents, buzzing with anticipation. Mrs. Harper sat in the front row, a leather portfolio in her lap, looking like a kindly grandma ready to school a courtroom. Cassandra, at the committee table with members Tom Reynolds and Sarah Mitchell, seemed rattled by the crowd. Her usual swagger faltered as she called the meeting to order. First case, fence height violation at 1428 Willow Drive, she said, her voice tight. Mrs. Harper rose, radiating quiet authority, and handed out copies of Dr. Carter's report. I'm appealing this violation, she began, her tone measured but firm. The cited measurements are incorrect. Certified data shows my fence averages 3 feet 11.2 inches well within the 4-foot limit. Tom, a retired banker with a knack for fairness, pored over the report. This is thorough, Mrs. Harper. Multiple tools, independent verification. Cassandra bristled. My measurements showed 4 feet 4 inches at multiple points. Mrs. Harper didn't flinch. She slid photos and a technical diagram across the table. These images from my security camera show 2 issues, improper technique and a defective tape measure. The room gasped as she explained how Cassandra's stretch tape inflated readings by 10 fan tram. Sarah's eyes widened. Mrs. Harper, are you saying other violations might be wrong too? The question hit like a grenade. Cassandra's face turned scarlet. I've used this tape since I started, and no one's complained. Mrs. Harper's reply was gentle but cutting. Most folks don't have laser tools or engineering friends. The crowd erupted in whispers. Sarah moved to dismiss the violation. Tom seconded, and Cassandra had no choice but to agree. But Sarah wasn't done. I move we suspend all measurement-based violations from the last 6 months until we verify them with proper tools. Cassandra protested, but the motion passed, Leah VYing her stunned. As we left, neighbors swarmed Mrs. Harper, thanking her, while Cassandra slipped out a side door, her reign unraveling. The fallout was seismic. An emergency HOA meeting drew a record crowd to the rec center. The air crackled with change. Board President Henry Walsh laid out the issue. Faulty measurements had undermined trust. Residents shared stories of dubious fines. A contractor offered measuring tips, and a teacher pushed for tool calibration. Mrs. Harper proposed a standardized protocol, emphasizing systems over blame. By the end, the board approved new equipment, clear guidelines, and refunds for questionable fines. Cassandra, silent and stiff, seemed to shrink under the weight of her errors. Yet, in a twist, Cassandra didn't quit. She stepped down from the appeals committee, but joined Mrs. Harper on a new measurement standards team. Neighbors gawked as the 2 women, once foes, walked Willow Creek, testing protocols with shiny new tools. 3 months later, I saw them in the park, Cassandra explaining a form she designed, Mrs. Harper showing proper technique. They're a team now, Sarah said, chuckling. Evelyn's the brains, Cassandra's the organizer. A year later, Willow Creek had changed. The rule book slimmed down, notices became educational, and neighbors talked before tattling. At Mrs. Harper's garden party, celebrating a new, precisely measured gate, I watched Cassandra serve lemonade, laughing with guests. Mrs. Harper leaned in, her eyes on her perfect 4-foot fence. In physics, errors happen. What matters is catching them, fixing them, learning. Some tools and people need recalibrating. Her gaze flicked to Cassandra, now chatting about protocols with a new neighbor. That little fence dispute sparked a revolution. Pro-VYing, even small fights can reshape a community. But what do you think? Was Cassandra's strict rule following just a power trip? Or did she mean well? Should Mrs. Harper have fought harder to oust her? Or was teaching her a better win? And what about those fines? Should the HOA have done more to make things right? Drop your thoughts below. Hit that like button if this story got you fired up. And subscribe for more tales where everyday drama turns epic.